Actually, it's Brainy App is the name of the business, and Fatigue Friend is the name of the app. So thank you for inviting me here today. And this is just about, can anyone hear me? Is that better? Is it? Sorry. I'm not great with microphones. So thank you for inviting me here today. And my talk is about how I've got this far with Fatigue Friend. That's what I'm talking about. So it's kind of the research and development side. Sorry, I've been this done. So I used to work as a clinical nurse specialist in stroke rehabilitation, and 5 years ago I had a rare type of stroke which left me with ongoing cognitive impairments and chronic fatigue. It was a subarachnoid hemorrhage is what I actually had, and I was fortunate in the fact that they could actually coil it rather than having to do open surgery. And after I went home, I found it very hard to adjust to life in the community. I had difficulty with memory, as in not remembering to turn off the cooker, which if any of you work in healthcare here, especially in rehabilitation, that's a sign of that you shouldn't really go home on your own. Also on top of that, I had problems with walking down the stairs, so I'd actually wouldn't be able to basically get the right foot on the stairs, and I'd end up falling down the stairs invariably. And the other problem I had was actually chronic fatigue, where basically even turning over in the bed, I used to get so exhausted I actually used to fall back to sleep. Or even from the point of view of I'd be downstairs having a cup of tea, and I couldn't actually drink a full mug of tea because it was just too exhausting. So I used to only be able to drink half a cup of tea at a time. So as you can see, you become very demotivated and depressed. And I really began to wonder what was day and what was night and what was reality and what wasn't. So after going around in a fog and a haze for about 6 months, I said I can't go on like this for the rest of my life. So I decided to make up a motivation program for myself. So I wrote down basically the symptoms that I had, or the things that I actually felt. And I suppose the main ones would have been insomnia, fatigue, and basically then also on top of that, I decided to set up goals for myself. So I started with weekly goals because I had very limited self-awareness, so I thought this would be great, but realised over time that this wasn't working, so I changed them to monthly goals. And I suppose I realised as well as the fact that sometimes I'm not going to be able to achieve my goal, but that's fine because that's my recovery and that's me. So it made me realise that basically it was normal to feel the way I did. And basically, over time then, in the space of about 6 months, I began to slowly recover, and I began to accept what had actually happened to me. And from there, I realised I wouldn't be able to go back to my job as a clinical nurse specialist in stroke, and that basically I'd have to do something about this. So I self-referred myself to Headway, which took 8 months to be seen, and they confirmed that yes, the cognitive deficits that I was talking about I actually had, and they referred me to the National Rehabilitation Hospital in Dunleary because I had visual vertigo and vestibular migraines, and also my cognitive impairments from the occupational therapist side. And from there then I realised I still knew I wouldn't be able to go back to my job as a clinical nurse specialist, so I said, what am I going to do now? So what I did was I looked at my pre-skills and what I actually have now in comparison to what I had before. And I suppose as a clinical nurse specialist, these are the kind of main focus that you have. And if you're in the job more than 2 years or more, not that I want anyone here to have a brain injury, but basically you're automatically able to do your job. So for me, what I've retained from my stroke is research and auditing. It's slowly starting off, but I'm actually getting much better. Advice and guidance support to carers and family. I was doing that pre-stroke, education, documentation. I had a stroke clinic, so I had a very good idea about what it was kind of like living in the community with the stroke after and what services were lacking out there. So basically from there, then people said to me, you're actually, very accepting about the fact, because I used to love working on my job. It was a stroke unit that was set up. I was involved in the setting of the unit, so it was kind of my baby. And but I said what I developed, and they said, well, why don't you make that into an app to help other people? And that's what I did. So this was the first app that I've developed. And I had over 200 downloads in a year, which wasn't bad. It was mostly word by mouth. I knew from the stroke clinic that basically, generally with strokes, that they're actually in pockets of areas. So if you told one person, it's guaranteed somebody in 6 months within that area was going to have a stroke as well, and they'd pass on the information. So that's how it happened. I found it very difficult trying to get traction from hospitals. They were very supportive initially, but the further it came to actually development, the quieter they got. So I just left that out and just went the way it was. So at the end of a year, I had over 200 downloads, as I said, and people gave me feedback. Initially, they were all like, I can't cope and it's very difficult and all the rest. And by the end of the 6 months, they were basically telling me what they wanted changed on the app. So it did help them accept what had actually happened to them. They wanted to self-manage their care within the hospital setting because they felt that it should start there, because basically that's where we feel safe and secure. And if you have the time to be able to do that there, it would actually be brilliant, to be much better than in the community when you're trying to do about 60 things at one time. They said it took control of their life, but not their fatigue and insomnia, and they wanted that broken down more, and they also wanted choices and decisions on the app as well. So basically, patients, we see ourselves as part of we want to be part of the team when we're actually in the hospital setting. And this is a common recurring theme from any talks that I give with, or any focus groups that I give with patients. It's the first thing I always ask is, if you're in the hospital setting, what would you change? And the thing is, they want to be seen as part of the team. They want people to listen to what goals are important to them. And they said that these aren't really listened to. It's important. I know you need your washing and dressing, and you need to be able to walk, but we have other goals that are important to us, and these we feel are not being listened to. So this is the way kind of they're looking forward to going through in the future. So basically, for me, what I did then was I looked at I basically broke down, like the way I did with the first app, I broke down fatigue and insomnia and how I felt at different times. And I wrote down symptoms for each of those stages to see actually how I was. And basically from there, I thought I'd developed different types of fatigue and insomnia. So I went and held focus groups in Cork and in Dublin, and people started saying, well, I might feel like that early in the morning, but then later in the day, I progressed to this stage. So I began to realise there were actually early warning stages rather than actual different types of fatigue. So basically for warning stage 1, people, you can't do anything about that, you just end up at that stage. But for 2 and 3, it's more environmental, so you can actually prevent those. And then when you reach warning stage 4, that's when you've pushed your limits and you basically really can't do anything, and whatever you're doing, you should actually stop doing. So after that then, I decided to hold, I wanted to kind of get feedback from healthcare professionals to see what they thought of what I was actually developing, or did they recognise the symptoms, or what was the story. So I had an anonymous questionnaire. Very kindly, the Irish Heart Foundation let me actually have a questionnaire at their conference, and 75 people filled in the questionnaire. As you can see there, 40% were nursing. They were the main people, and then the other occupational therapists and physiotherapists. And then recognising the symptoms, 88% recognised the obvious symptoms like irritable and extremely tired and falling asleep, but they thought they were related to physical fatigue, and they thought it was more that the person was being lazy rather than actually wanting to participate in their rehabilitation. So, but actually, the occupational therapists and the psychologists did recognise all the symptoms. And interesting enough, the pushing limits, the warning stage 4, 100% everybody actually recognised that, but they actually didn't realise they were related to fatigue. They thought there were medical complications because you're talking about headache and dizziness. So it kind of got me thinking about things. So then I actually had a stand at the Dublin Tech Summit, and people came over. I had the same questionnaire there. It was actually because there's a med tech section, and I was looking for healthcare professionals to come over to me. And people came over that with ordinary people, and they said, oh, I can recognise these symptoms. I had burnout 6 months ago. I can recognise these symptoms. So I began to realise that this is not just specifically for people with strokes and traumatic brain injuries. You're also talking about people with chronic fatigue, and also people living with burnout and potentially with stress. So I suppose these are my cognitive deficits that I have, and these are the type of people that will be actually using the app. These would have used the first app, and basically, so with us, we've very limited self-awareness. So, and I suppose for people, which I found interesting with people at the Dublin Tech Summit that had burnout, they're kind of in denial about the fact that they're actually getting tired. So it kind of links up to no self-awareness. So basically, then I wanted to kind of get an idea of what people actually thought and what were their testimonials about living with fatigue. And this is things that people said, that they're exhausted all the time and the pace is too fast. One is that basically when you go somewhere and then you realise, how am I going to get home because I'm so exhausted? Because that's, it's great going to visit, meeting somebody for coffee or going in for your meeting, but then it's like, oh God, how am I going to get home from this situation? That's what exhausts you and tires you out. So by the time you get home, you're exhausted. So basically, this is starting with Fatigue Friend app. Now, what I've done is this app will be for people living currently in the community. And basically, I'm starting with neurological and acquired brain injury. and also people with burnout. So the problems then are, as you know, chronic fatigue is a debilitating and distressing condition. A person can go from being fit and healthy with loads of energy to exhausted and drained all the time and living on a battery life of 30% per day, and that's actually been proven. So you can see if you start on 30% per day, it's very difficult to kind of function throughout your day. And I suppose even people here in the room, you'd have a few nights that you might have persistent sleep problems, and from there you come into work and you're irritable and you're annoyed and all you want to do is go home, your concentration is down, and invariably you make mistakes, and that's what it's like living with chronic fatigue all the time. And in addition to that, we have an insomnia that is related to fatigue, where we end up, it's like we're actually been at a rave all night and we're in the bed and we're hopping, we can't literally sit still. And invariably what people will do is they'll get up and they'll go downstairs, they'll make a cup of tea, or they'll try and use their Headspace app, and of course then the brain goes, this is great, now I can wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then you're in a cycle of insomnia at night time. So people become very demotivated and very depressed. They go to their GP looking for something, and the GP says there's nothing I can actually give you, or sometimes they might give them antidepressants, or they might give them something to help with their insomnia at night time. So it's an ongoing cycle at the end of the day. So basically what Fatigue Friend does is prevents full-blown episodes of chronic fatigue through a series of alerts based on recognising early warning stages of fatigue onset. And it means for the person, they can actually self-manage and control their fatigue. And it's over a 24-hour period, so they can have a planner. And you can also pool your energy levels. So basically, for me coming here today, I've been actually sleeping on and off yesterday, taking little naps, so that I can actually get on the train, come down here, give the talk, be able to go back to Dublin on the train, and basically have to meet my daughter this evening because she's actually just finished her leaving cert, so I have to be alert and awake and orientated for that as well. So it means that I'm able to do all of that, plus tomorrow I can actually keep going with my business. So it's something that does actually work, and I actually have got people using it on paper and they're finding it very beneficial. So this is the 24-hour planner. Basically, I only did up till 6 o'clock because my attention span left at that stage, and I said, actually, you'll get the idea of what I'm on about. So basically what you have is your alerts here, which are your green, orange and red, which gives you examples of what you should do for each stage. So it says for warning stage 1, you just observe and reassess the symptoms. Then for 2, you restructure. And then for 3, then you just, for warning stage 4, you just don't do anything. So you can see here, your baseline is 8 to 9 in the morning, your warning stage 1. A pop-up will come up and tell you advice on what you should do, or you can actually write in your own information, because it's something that came out from focus groups, that basically it's important for people to have an individualised profile. So you can build up your individualised profile with this, and you can map and track your progress, you can map and track your patterns, and you can manage your energy levels more effectively. So as I said, I'm starting with the B2C model because that's where I've actually got the best traction at the moment. And I'm starting with acquired brain injury and neurological conditions. And there's estimated that there's 750,000 people living in Ireland with either of these, which accounts for 1/3 of the population. And 25,000 people are under the age of 65 are living with stroke at the moment. I'm on an online stroke support group that the Irish Heart Foundation have set up, and basically, interesting enough, a lot of the people on that actually are in jobs, and a lot of them actually are running their own businesses, are actually very high up positions in their businesses. So they've actually found me on LinkedIn, and they're interested in what I'm actually doing, and are interested in actually buying the application that I'm developing. So between linking to the websites and actually putting up the information, and actually basically being on LinkedIn, it'll actually help people to buy or market the app. And I suppose my key milestones to date then, I've done my research and development, which I did all of last year, which was more of a proof of concept. I was on the DCU Ryan Academy Female High Flyers programme, which I've just finished now, and I won an award there for the most potential business to scale globally. And then I developed a basic prototype in March and April for proof of concept, as I just said. I was shortlisted for the National Startup Awards, and basically we're going to start testing the app this month. I'm actually linking to a company called Research Hug. They actually enable healthcare professionals to develop apps for their speciality, and you can actually see the app being built as you go along. And basically, I've just actually got successfully onto the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, which is a Trinity validator program in Trinity, and it's actually going to validate your application in Europe as well. So you go on a tour to France, Netherlands, and then also to England as well. And it's also linked to eHealth here as well. And then I hope to launch the app in in October, I've written down there. So basically the value proposition then is that basically I'm a brain injury survivor, and I remember retaining all my information since pre-stroke, and I also manage my energy levels on a daily basis, so this is something that I do all the time, and I'm also putting the cognitive on the front end of the application, so the person is actually assessing themselves. And then this is just the revenue model that I'm planning to use, €60 for per yearly or €6 monthly. It's on average with Headspace. And then I just basically, these are testimonials of people that I've either reviewed the application or are interested in actually buying it. I didn't include stroke survivors because I thought that people might think that was kind of biased, but actually, quite honest, they're the most critical at the end of the day. If something isn't working for them, they're well able to come back to me and say, this isn't working, I want this on it, I want that on it. But for the giving presentations, I think basically for people, as we call you, the normal people, it's better just to not have them there at the moment. Interesting enough, from the Irish Heart Foundation, the Nurses Helpline, they said they get 10 calls per day for people looking for something on fatigue, and so they have no problem in actually recommending the fatigue friend. Then for the future, I'm linking with Headway to get the application accredited, and that's for globally, and that's with the Commission of Accreditation and Rehabilitation Facilities. I'm collaborating with the National Institute of Health Research, and we're going to start a feasibility study, a randomised controlled study with a very small group of people first, because we're assessing the patient self-assessing themselves in the acute setting with the fatigue friend. And then my aim in the future then is to look at prevention and biomarkers and identifying chronic fatigue and trying to stop chronic fatigue. Thank you.